there is an esoteric layer underneath. The words and the stories are just frames to hang other information on that's a lot deeper.
You're watching the Wow podcast. I'm Jennifer Robin. Full disclosure is in the description. Today on the show, we have Reginald Martin, a spiritual architect, metaphysician, and creator of Ka Metaphysics, which merges ancient Kemetic science with modern psychology. Its purpose is to help spiritually evolved leaders, creators, and visionaries reconstruct their inner architecture, transcend inherited limitations, and create life on their terms without guilt or shame. Reginald guides people through a process of identity resurrection, teaching them how to live by universal law, rewrite subconscious programming, and access their soul's original blueprint for power, peace, and purpose. Sounds fantastic. Welcome, Reginald.
Hey, Jennifer, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. You have such a calm, joyful presence. I'm liking it.
Hey, life is good. You know, I always say if I wake up breathing, it's all good after that.
That is true. So for listeners that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with this.
I grew up in Texas, grew up in a staunch religious family that basically said to me, I called the way I grew up is you don't do this and you don't do that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I was introduced to a lot of ideas. So it was like living life through your limitations is what it was. You know, I ended up going to college and, majored in psychology and business and finished all that, got married, had children, divorced. And then that's basically, I guess, starting the years that I got married is when stuff just started to go things were real good for a few years. Then after that, it's like the bottom just fell out, divorce, just dealing with a lot, losing everything I had, just going through a lot of stuff. Okay. And so I was trying to figure out ways to cope, is really what it was. And, things were going through. So after my divorce so I read a book that said it takes about 5 years, to get through everything. And when I first read that sentence, I was like, 5 years? I'm like, why would it take that long? I was like, no way, Jennifer.
Yeah.
It took 5 years and some more.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I believe it.
Yeah. So to finally get through everything. So it was, but through all of that and trying to figure out just how to, get off the emotional roller coaster and dealing with depression, dating again after divorce, just all of those things just culminated in me figuring out ways. And then I just developed metaphysics through my life experience. So what I teach is about practical application, because so many times people give us this theoretical stuff. It sounds good. And I hear a lot of people create a lot of word salads, where they put together some sentences,
yes.
but they,
yes.
They really don't make any sense once you really try to apply something. So
Yeah.
metaphysics is, I promise you, it's about you developing you.
Now, break down that word for me, metaphysics, so that our listeners can understand where that came from and what that actually means.
So it came from the ancient Kemetic system, which is ancient Kemet is actually prehistoric Egypt. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So it's the spiritual system of prehistoric Egypt, and the Ka is actually like the soul or life force that is within us all. Okay. And metaphysics, of course, is just the idea of dealing with spirituality, but from a non-dogmatic perspective. So we're dealing with spirituality, stuff that is beyond the soul, beyond the physical, metaphysical, and I just, so this is about really tapping into your soul level operating system is what I call that. And a lot of times people don't realize that As souls, the soul still perceives through us while we are living, you know? It's just we are actually souls having a human experience,
Hmm.
and we can communicate and back and forth with that aspect of ourselves all the time. So the metaphysics is about the soul level experience of us as humans having a human experience, or souls having a human experience.
Nice. And you mentioned dogma, and I know in your trainings you talk about having structure without dogma and why that's important for spiritual leaders. And talk a little bit about that.
So structure without the dogma basically means that you have a system that is not telling you what to think or how to think. It's just giving you parameters that you can operate and build a foundation on. So I like to say dogma is like giving you a box that you have to fit in, but spirituality is
Yes.
like giving you a foundation that you can build on.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. I like that. Also, I know you talk a lot about why traditional therapeutic approaches and even pastoral counseling, why those fall short when people are having like serious, deep spiritual struggles. Like why is that not enough for them? What is it that's missing in those cases?
Yeah, because it's a lot of times what happens is that when people are having these struggles, because you're literally leaving a way of identifying yourself, you know,
Yeah.
and you're moving away from. So even if it is, you know, you leave because of the negativity and the negative aspect of it, it still was a frame that you operated life within. Okay. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times what happens is that I've seen where you know, pastors will they'll say that they're deconstructing, but they're still living in the same box. Okay. So and really it's about the identity. So from a religious perspective, and me growing up as a Christian, one of the foundational beliefs was is that you were a born sinner. And because
Yes.
you are a born sinner, you need to be saved. So that's a whole construct
Yeah.
that you're living in. And the born sinner also end up having a lot of other what I call tentacles that stream from that umbrella belief, because you're born sinner, you're unworthy, you're broken. So all of those things you're dealing with within that frame. Well, if you're a therapist or a pastoral leader that is deconstructing yourself, but you're still operating within that box, then you're still operating within that limitation of I'm broken, you
Yeah.
know, at least. And if you don't have something that you can shift people away from, then everything that you do is going to end up running back to that box, because you can help them to psychologically move away from, you know, some beliefs, but then they can't move away from that the brokenness. So that's one of the limitations of, you know, therapists and you know, pastoral people that are still operating with that in that idea. Through Kemetic physics, you get to have a totally different frame, because I go back to where the ancient religious beliefs and ancient Christian beliefs started. And that's really what helped me through a lot with Kemetic physics, was that I found the non-dogmatic spirituality before Christianity really distorted them. And from a Kemetic perspective, you're not born broken, you're born divine.
Mm.
That is a totally different frame to operate within. When you're born divine, it's not that you're trying to fix people. You're basically, when you're born divine, then you might get out of alignment energetically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a totally different frame from let
Yes.
me fix you to wait a minute, you're out of alignment. Let's see if we can get back into alignment.
Okay. Now, how did you go about doing all of this research and jumping in and learning the Kemetics and learning all of this stuff from ancient Egypt? What did that look like, doing your
Oh
research?
man,
And
that started right after my divorce, Jennifer, where I was going through a lot and still dealing with it. And I've always learned more about me through my relationships. Okay.
Mhm.
And after divorce, you're starting to date. I started trying to date. Okay. And let me tell you, so that my biggest lesson and my biggest aha came through that, because what I realized was that I dated different women, but I was dating the same woman that just had a different face, different body, different time, whatever. What I ended up doing was I had to take a look at myself. Okay, if I'm getting treated the same way in all of my relationships, then either all of these women have gotten together and conspired to treat me the same way,
Yeah.
or there's some reason that me, as the common denominator, are choosing these type women.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, it, reality said, well, they didn't know each other. So that had to throw out that first hypothesis. you know,
Yeah.
Now being bitter and angry, I wanted it to be that. but but in reality, they never knew each other. So it had to be something about me that was making me choose these type relationships and these type women. Well, the I around 2006, I was told about The Secret. So my brother, who was telling me about it, he was like, "Man, have you heard about The Secret?" And so I'm listening to him. I didn't know it was a movie or anything at that point. And I'm like, "No, man, what is it?" So Jennifer, he started telling me this stuff and all this. And I'm sitting there, and Jennifer, I'm getting kind of angry because I'm like, dude, when are you going to tell me the secret? When are you going to let me know? So come on with it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking. And so then at some point I figured out, oh, he's talking about a movie called The Secret. And then I
Yeah.
stopped being mad at him for a little while. But
I remember when that came out, and at that time, I was a practicing Christian as well, and we were told not to watch it, not to watch it,
yep,
not to read
yep,
it. It was like, even my relatives, I remember talking about it, like, oh, that's the devil's work. Don't even. And it was years after that. I don't even think I saw that until maybe 5, 10 years ago. Like, I saw it way after it came out.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Interesting. Sorry, that
yeah.
just
Well,
popped into my mind. I remember it was like a controversy, at
no, you're
least
you're
in my
right.
church.
You're right. No, it was a controversy in Christendom. I mean,
Yes.
it was like, because it was basically from their perspective, it was saying we didn't need God, you know, on one simple, principle that they were arguing about. But,
Yeah.
but for me, it was like, it was a lifeline, because one of the things that stuck out in that movie was the idea of thoughts become things. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So they didn't when I heard that, it confirmed what I was experiencing and what I thought about as far as I was experiencing in dating. When I heard that, I was like, I was all in. Okay, thoughts become things. But having grown up in the church, I'm no longer in the place where I can just accept what somebody tells me. I'm like, I got to find out. Okay, well, how true is this? I like it. It sounds good, but what's the foundation of it? Where did it come
Yeah.
from?
Where did it come from?
Yeah.
I'm
So
big on that
how did they
too.
come to
Is
these ideas?
yes. Yeah.
You know. So in the movie, there's a portion of it they're talking about it, and they kind of allude to the Greeks having the secret. They didn't say that, but they alluded to
Yeah.
it by showing the Greeks and there's the cities and stuff like that. So that to me raised my antenna, because years ago I had actually read a book called Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James, that
Hmm.
talked about how the Greeks basically got their knowledge from Egypt. Okay, so the Greek miracle happened because they got their knowledge from ancient Egypt, and all of a sudden just flourished. Well, for me, that said, okay, so I knew the Egyptians taught the Greeks, and just me being, you know, knowing that Egypt is in Africa, I'm, being African American, I have an interest in the studies of what did my ancestors believe before Christianity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it made me go back and start to research. I started researching The Secret, but what I ended up finding out was not only these ideas of The Secret come from ancient Egypt, but also Christianity and things that I had questions about Christianity. So it ended up essentially killing two birds with one stone. Is what it did. What it did. And what I recognized is that the ideas that The Secret was built on was actually the ideas that most spiritual systems were built on, and what Christianity was supposed to be teaching, but changed. So that's what
Mm.
started me to researching. And man, it was just fascinating to find all of the stuff that I did about Christianity, but to also find out that what became Christianity was actually spiritual concepts that are a part of all spiritual systems, of the
Yeah.
world's spiritual systems, but Christianity distorted them.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done a lot of research as well. And to me, it's just amazing the knowledge that's out there or that was out there that nobody looks at anymore or talks about or like pretends isn't there. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, and it's these days it is so easy to research and find.
yes.
You have to want to be ignorant, and
Yeah.
a lot of people growing up in my brand of Christianity that I grew up with, researching anything about the Bible was a no-no. You just didn't you were supposed to
Yeah.
take it on faith
You weren't
and
supposed to question anything.
not
Yeah.
question anything, because
Yeah.
if you question something, then that means that your faith was suspect. And if your faith was suspect, you were suspect. So you were basically stuck in this loop of you don't question, you just have faith, you know? And
Yep.
that to
I
me
know
is no
exactly
more
what
than
you mean.
mind
Yep.
control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about biblical characters. You say that they were originally archetypes or metaphors. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was one of the things that I hadn't ever saw expressed anywhere. Okay, so when I discovered this, I was like, man,
Yeah.
everybody will want to know this.
Yeah.
Uh, well, the first people that I wanted to tell about that was my family, and boy, that was a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
but but at any rate, so the idea is how the ancient Egyptians actually looked at nature and the universe. Okay, so they had these they had what we know of as the Egyptian gods is actually
Hmm.
a misnomer. Okay, so they weren't gods because the earliest Egyptologists were usually Christian, and they really filtered a lot of their ideas about ancient Egypt through their Christian beliefs. And to
Mm.
them, the idea of worship was just seemed like it was a natural thing. So they assumed that everything that the Egyptians created was they were worshiping these half people, half animal people as gods. But that was not the case. What they were creating were archetypes.
Mm.
So, for example, the idea of Horus, or in ancient Egypt, it was Heru. You had this man that had a falcon head on their body. So what they were doing, they created this archetype of a netter that was the archetype of a universal higher self,
Mm.
is the way that you could consider this. So Horus as an archetype is the idea of the aha moment. Okay. So you're going through life, something happens, and then you're dealing with stuff, and then you go, ah, I get it now. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, Jennifer, that's something that happens to us. If you live any length of time, you're gonna have something to where you have an aha moment. You
Yeah.
figure some stuff out. Okay. Well, 10,000 years ago, the same thing was happening, in people's lives. Now they might be dealing with different stuff, but it's the same principle. It's happening. But they also had a system where they created for their netters where It was really based on energy, and it was based on vibration. And the names of their netters, or what we know as gods, were actually vibrational recipes. So
Ooh.
how you understood which level that they were talking about was by the name. So Horus, on a universal level, was the primordial light of the universe that basically filtered and dispersed you everything. Okay. So and that at that universal level, it was called Yeusa, okay, which is IUSA. So Y and I in ancient times basically were interchangeable in names. Okay.
Okay.
So Yeusa was the primordial light of the creator. Okay. Also used metaphorically as a fire, a type of fire, the will and light of God that dispersed into creation. Okay. The name Yeusa is traced to the Hebrew name Yeshua.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So Yeshua is the light of the creator that has fragmented and dispersed into creation. Okay.
Hmm.
So that was the archetype. Well, keep going down to Yeusa, and yes, Yeusa, Yeshua became Jesus. So Jesus is the actual archetype for the aha moment. Let's take this to how the ancients actually used these ideas as frameworks to help us understand us, ourselves. So the idea of Yeshua and Jesus was actually supposed to be about the light within us discovering our divinity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a framework, let's take one of the miracles of Jesus that became a part of the New Testament, because again, all of this disseminated down through the Greeks. These books came from the Gnostics. Now, the Gnostics never ever thought Yeusa or Yeshua, or as they called them, Yeisus, was a historical person, ever. Let's take the miracle of Jesus walking on water. Everybody knows this story. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a situation where you're going through some difficult times and you're like emotionally just going through it? Maybe it might be you dealing with bills, and you got more month ahead than you do money, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it happens, and you're like, oh man, what's going to happen when I come through the end of the month, and blah blah blah. So you're going through this, okay? Well, at some point, things either they work out or you figure out a way to solve the problem. Okay. Then all of a sudden, all of that emotional turbulence that you had goes away. And then you go and you say, wow, I made it through. I figured some stuff out. It wasn't that bad. Aha. You know?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the situation that I just described is the miracle of Jesus walking on water. Water, basically, from an esoteric perspective, water symbolizes emotions. Okay.
Okay.
So when Jesus walked on water, that meant that at some point your aha said, I'm not going to dip down into that emotional quagmire. I'm going to step up above it, and I'm okay. You
Hmm.
know, but every now and then you're okay, but sometimes you might still drop down in that quagmire. Well, remember, Peter got out the boat and he was walking on the water for a little while, and then all of a sudden, maybe a friend of Peter says, "Dude, you can't walk on water," and Peter was like, "Oh, I guess I can't." He sunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, your friend might have said, "Jennifer, you don't know what you're going to do." And then you sunk and went back into the emotional state that you were in.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
that miracle is a framework of saying, hey, guys, when you're going through stuff, at some point, you're going to rise above your emotions and walk over your emotions. That's what that story means. It's just an archetype, a framework to let us know that this is what happens as we go through difficulties. Now, by our standard today, that's a pretty simple framework, a pretty simple story, you know?
Right.
But back then, that was revolutionary, you know? So you can go through every miracle of Jesus and you can see the same framework when you understand the esoteric language that's underneath it.
That's pretty wild. So, talk to me a little bit about how astrology and the elemental sciences and numerology intertwine as you're decoding biblical and Kemetic symbolism.
Okay. So let's go back to the idea of Yeusa again. So let's talk about numerology, okay, first, okay, because basically the whole universe is built on numbers, and that's the way the ancients see it, and that's the way we see it now. Even today, if you think about computers, okay, if you think about a digital image that has, I don't know how many, millions of pixels, but all those pixels have to be arranged in a certain fashion. So it's the underneath that image, that symbol of us is actually pixels. It's numbers. Okay, the universe is the same way. So the idea of Yeusa as the primordial light incarnating or coming into the universe, that's just the number one. It's just the idea that there is one source of everything. Okay. But when it descends, it has to descend into duality. That's the number two. Okay. And then as it descends into duality, then it's going to create something new from that descent. That's just the number three. Okay. And the idea of the Trinity. Okay. So that's just a basic rudimentary idea. So the numbers go all the way from 0 to 9 is how the system works. You can go into numerology and you can see even in the story of Jesus, we can talk about the number 3. So there is a story that Jesus was supposedly missing. What was the age that he supposedly came up missing?
You're trying on my memory. I don't know.
It was
say
age 12.
Oh, I was going to say 11, but no.
Close. But supposedly from the age of 12 to 30, these will call the missing years.
Oh, the missing years, yes.
Yeah. And people have made up all kinds of stories that Jesus went to India and learned Buddhism because some of his stuff sounds like Buddhism. But if you're using numerology, what is the numbers 1 plus 2? 3.
Yep.
Okay. And then if you're using numerology, what's the numbers 3 plus 0? 3. Okay. So what we're talking about is the idea of Yeusa on the earth plane at age 12 that has now elevated spiritually at the age of 30. There were no missing years. It was just the idea of numerology and that you grow as you spiritually and with wisdom as you go through life. Okay. So 12 and 30 those were just two numbers in their system. Okay. So astrology is basically the idea of the sun and the stars. Okay. From the ancient perspective, the universe is actually an analysis of who we are from within. Okay. So what's out there is the actual breakdown and analysis of what's in us. Okay. That's why astrology maps a lot of things to us and our behavior. There's 12 signs of the zodiac. Okay. Well, when the light dispersed into creation, the number 12 became important. So how many disciples did Jesus have?
Yep, the 12.
Well, the 12 signs of the 12 disciples are actually 12 aspects that we go through as we're going through life. Okay. You can trace every disciple to a zodiac sign. It is the sun, S-U-N, of God that is traveling the heavens. So even the idea of the solstice, the Latin word for sun is S-O-L. The solstice is actually when the sun stands still. So we have a winter solstice and a summer solstice. Okay. The winter solstice is when the sun is at the lowest point of its descent. Okay. Now, let me take this back one step here. And let's go to the idea of the crucifixion. Because the crucifixion is actually the idea of the four elements needed for us to actually cross into the physical world as souls. So earth, air, fire, and water are the actual elements needed for us to cross into the physical world, okay? And at some point, when we cross into the physical world, we end up, going through our difficulties, and we go through what's called the dark night of the soul, okay? Well, the dark night of the soul is actually the idea of the sun at Christmas, or really at the winter solstice on December 22nd.
Okay.
The ancients said that the sun died. And what they meant by that is at noontime every day, that's when they would measure the arc of the sun going across the sky. Well, on December 22nd at noontime, the sun stays at the same point at noon every day for 3 days. Then on the 25th is when it finally starts back its arc back up again, okay? That's when the Son of God was born, okay? The S-U-N, okay? At some point, you go through the dark night of the soul and you start to recognize your power as a soul having a human experience. And then at some point, we're all supposed to, well, not supposed to, hopefully, we're all recognize that we are souls having a human experience. And that's when we recognize our own divinity. When we recognize our own divinity, that's when we actually resurrect, or remember is what they called it. You remember who you are. So when you actually are crucified, the death is actually you forgetting that you are a soul.
Okay.
Okay. That's the death. So when you remember, that's the resurrection. The way Christianity has taught it is that the death and the crucifixion and the resurrection is only 3 days apart. So they changed the story again to create their dogma. But the whole story, the non-dogmatic aspects of it, are about us and our journey on one level. I hope that makes sense. I know I've been going on for a while here.
It does. But I know I've done lots of research in this. It's hard for our listeners, it kind of depends on how much research they've done and where they are in their journey, as far as if what you said was terrifying or kind of makes sense or totally makes sense, right?
Right. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
The point of us being here as a soul having a temporary physical experience. One of my teachers used to bring this up all the time, that, we think when something woo-woo happens, or there's a coincidence, or something happens in our favor, like going back to law of attraction, something good happens in your life that you were wanting to happen, and you're like, oh wow, I had kind of a spiritual experience. And he was like, no, it's not you're a physical person having these onesie twosie spiritual enlightening experiences. It's you're a soul here having this temporary physical experience. So it's interesting to hear that come up, similar language in what you're saying. I'm hearing this from different teachers, different authors. So they're saying it in slightly different ways, but to me, when I get information from multiple places and it's all saying a very similar thing, that lets me know I'm on the right track,
Exactly. That's Jennifer. I do that the same way, And the thing is that these ideas, first of all, they weren't new.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And you'll see them across all different spiritual systems. I mean, even the idea of the aha moment, you'll find it in Buddhism, you'll find it in Hinduism, you'll find it all. And they all personify those ideas.
Yeah.
Okay. The main thing I wanted to say is that, yes, we see so many similarities. And to me, the similarities are really what is the foundational truths of non-dogmatic spirituality.
Yeah.
The way I see it is Christianity created something and said that it was new, it was a revelation, it was something different than anybody ever had did before, which is true. Okay. The way that they created the dogma, absolutely, it was new. But the thing that I have found in all my studies, and I've been studying this for years, and believe me, I used to be a believer. I grew up in it, deep in it. And I mean, Jennifer, I had a family that, if it didn't come out of the King James Bible, it wasn't the Bible. You had to have some these and thous and theys,
Yeah.
some shalls.
Yeah.
Or just that wasn't the real Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. That's how my family was in it. Okay. But what was new in Christianity, what I say is what was new was not true.
Mm.
And what is true is not new.
Yeah. I like seeing what the ancients did and how that ties in. And I'm still researching and learning, but it's amazing. And there's a lot of different perspectives about what some of this older information means, but I just find it fascinating just to look, just to see what the different perspectives are and how people are interpreting what they're finding from the past,
No, it is. And you're finding more and more people are starting to put a lot of this stuff out. And what
Yeah.
I found is that a lot of times, even our systems, it won't let you put this stuff out, because it offends people,
Yeah.
So I can't put ads out for what I do.
Oh, seriously? Like, is it against policies
Seriously.
because it's false information?
No, because it could be against somebody's beliefs and trigger them.
Mm.
So if I say anything that could go against someone's beliefs, then they will not let it pass through advertising.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a limitation. And I know I'm not the only one that's dealt with that.
Yeah.
So in a way, it suppresses
Yeah.
this knowledge and information, and people don't realize it.
Yeah.
So you have to go and find shows like yours. That's why shows like yours are so freaking important, because it allows us to talk about this knowledge and information this way.
And it seems like, particularly what you're talking about, it's almost like it needs to spread person to person as well. Kind of like your friend telling you about the secret. Like,
Yep.
it's like
Yep,
person
absolutely.
to person. Open
Person
your
to
mind
person,
and
podcast to podcast,
Yeah.
that's how a lot of it has to be done,
Yeah.
And again, I like to pride myself on the research that I do, because if I say something, I can prove it.
Yeah.
I can back it up.
Yeah.
And I can back it up in a way that I can connect. It's just about how much time do you have that I need to talk to you about
Yeah.
it. I've debated people about, the historical Jesus. And I don't know where you are on that.
I'm open-minded, absorbing information. That's where I am.
But what I did was I threw out a challenge that, I would debate any Christian, okay, on the historicity of Jesus, but they cannot use the Bible and they cannot use theology, and we're not talking about faith. Okay? Because what happens invariably is that in Christianity, you use the Bible to prove the Bible.
Right.
If I was writing a term paper in college or in school, could I use one book for all of my information and then use the book as the source for my paper?
I know, that's interesting. And I remember years ago when I first learned about the Dead Sea Scrolls and then the Nag Hammadi library. I personally was shocked to find out that, well, one, I remember with the Dead Sea Scrolls, I was very interested because I wanted to see like the original, what they found. And there was all this publicity about how it was the books of the Bible, and it says the same thing. But I was kind of ticked when I found out how much information was removed from what actually made it to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I haven't read all of the books. I've read some of them, but stuff like that.
Yeah, and a lot of those books were written all around the same time, between the 1st and 4th centuries. Okay.
Yes.
And they were written. A lot of them were Gnostic.
Yes.
So that the thing is that they were teaching in those books. They were teaching non-dogmatic ideas. Yeah.
That was my take on it as well.
And that's why they didn't make it into the Bible, because they couldn't stand on what Christianity had said was the truth. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why they didn't make it. And what ends up happening is you'll find again, first of all, there is an esoteric layer underneath. The words and the stories are just frames to hang other information on that's a lot deeper. That's what they
Yeah.
are. The Bible, the Nag Hammadi text, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of them are the same. They didn't write the way that we write today to disseminate information.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done a lot of studies recently in language also. How about that? About different codings in old writings and like how important the words were and the meanings of the words. And
Yeah, they had a whole secret framework of coding,
yeah.
you know?
And then you go back to even the symbols, which I've done a lot of reading on symbols. I wish I understood like Egyptian hieroglyphics and things. I don't, but that fascinates me too.
Yeah.
Is that a symbol could have a really deep meaning and we have no idea what those are anymore.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
lost that.
Yeah. And we just basically
So-
lost the framework of how to really decode the symbols. Now, I can't read all the hieroglyphics, but I can look at some of them, a lot of
Oh, wow.
the main gods, and
Yeah.
I know their symbolism. But one of the ways that really is powerful is to understand how they chose their symbols, how they chose and why they chose them. The way that they thought was that the physical world is actually a projection. Okay. That's the way that they looked at it. We as souls are projecting our consciousness into this reality. But everything is essentially a symbol of that other world that we're projecting from. So it is symbolic of that world. Well, the reason why they would choose like an animal head to represent an idea was that, say, Horus and the falcon. A
Yeah.
falcon, one, flies high, okay? Meaning that they're in between earth and heaven. So Horus is a messenger, but the messenger can translate from earth and to heaven, translate in between. We might call that our higher self today, okay?
Yeah.
But the falcon also has keen vision, much more keen than our vision. So it is able to see within a lot more than we are. So it can see in the dark. It can see it can see through our darkness. So these ideas represented again archetypes and functions, and they chose the animal heads to represent ideas that were more keen than us as humans. It's a pretty
Yeah.
ingenious system.
Yeah. And it's deep.
It is.
There's a lot. There's a lot there.
It
There's a lot
is.
there. So tell the listeners a little bit about the programs that you offer, the trainings that you offer, and how they could learn more if they want to dip their toe in.
At reginaldmartin.substack.com. My whole idea is to really help people shift ontologically, okay? And what I mean by that is ontology is the ancient study of being, okay? And so my idea for years has been to shift from I'm a born sinner and I'm broken to I am a god or goddess in training. Because that's what we are. This earth is a training ground for us developing wisdom beyond, our physical experience. We use the physical experience as a tool to do that. So that's the foundation of everything that I do. I have a course. If a person is deconstructing, I take them from the philosophical ideas and where they came from, and then I help them step through and understand the metaphysical, non-dogmatic, spiritual things that they can tap into. I call that Kemetic soul level operating system.
Okay. Is that for the everyday Joe or is that for the spiritual leaders?
Pretty much anything I do is going to be for the ones that are deep seekers
Okay.
or their spiritual
Okay.
leaders. Okay. Because we're the ones that really want to know, get deep into this so that we can help others.
Gotcha.
Okay. So if you're somebody that's a beginner, I would say that that's probably not for a beginner. Okay. Also have another course where I teach actually how to decode the symbols, how to learn esoteric knowledge. And I call that the esoteric adept. You go through to my Substack, and I have ways that you can connect to those if that's something that you want to learn.
Awesome.
Most definitely.
And we'll have all the links in the show notes so that you all can find everything, and that you can find Reginald and learn more. So I want to thank you so much for being here today. This was fun.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been great.
I love soaking up the knowledge with some of my expert guests. It's been fun. So that's it for today, and we will see you next week. Thanks for watching. Let me know what your biggest takeaway was. Just drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more.